2018 has been a pretty good year for me. I've really only had one bad news, and that is something that can actually be fixed. But what I am really talking about is cartoons. Last year, I was having some issues giving anything a chance because I knew that over time, or in some sort of sequel, it would be ruined. This is the main reason why I only really watched one episode of Milo Murphy's Law and never even gave OKKO a watch. But this year I finally came to a conclusion that moving on is the best way to deal with this kind of thing. Kind of like how I replaced Futurama with Rick and Morty as my sci-fi show, and MLP with Star as my fantasy show. It's not exactly, the best way to think about things, but it is at least a solution. I'm not exactly sure how to word myself on the point that I'm trying to make. Maybe I'll talk more about this in the future. Anyway, today has to do with a show that came out this year called Apple and Onion. Considering Cartoon Network had one of its worst years in its existence, and the last few years were building up to that, let's just say I wasn't looking forward to ever watching a CN show again. Also, on first glance, this show reminds me of another show that came out a few years back. Only this was the Disney XD show, and one of, if not their worst show to come out. Pickle and Peanut. Pickle and Peanut was about two anthropomorphic food main characters who lived in sort of a city and worked in a grocery store in the mall. They would also get in wacky adventures and meet weird people across the way. Other than the grocery store being a dollar store, that exactly explains Apple and Onion. If Disney, one of the best cartoon companies in the world, couldn't do the show right, how could modern day Cartoon Network? Oh, and another thing, this episode is about sports. I hate sports. Okay, that isn't entirely true. I mean, some sport video games I enjoy, and occasionally shooting hoops with friends and or family can be fun. But as far as watching it and really getting into it, yeah, that's a no. I mean, most athletes I couldn't even name. But this is just about the 2-on-2 Orwell 4-on-4 B-ball city tournament. I've seen this plot pop up a lot lately. I guess it's because it is easiest to convey and animate. All you really need to know about basketball is the main characters need to put their ball into their basket, and the other team tries to stop them. This episode doesn't go into all of the stupid fouls and rules and shit. All of this taken under consideration, there is no possible reason I should like this episode, or even farther this show. Or hell, that the show should even have any quality, right? I would say that the show is bad, but the show knows it's bad, which makes it hilarious. This show relies on dry humor, in which is a form of comedy that I don't really understand very well. But I can definitely see the appeal. Sometimes less is more. The best example of this I can think of is Aqua Teen Hunger Force, which I don't really like, but I can still admit it can be funny. The comedy of this show is pretty well done, but how are the plots? That's actually why I decided to review this episode in particular. I'm a storyteller, it's what I do. So, something like a plot is the most important to me. This show is broken into two 11-minute episodes, like SpongeBob, which don't really have continuity except Apple and Onion getting a job. 11-minute time slot, however, that is all this episode needs. I'm sure most of you don't really want to hear this, but I have to say it anyway. Whenever I started watching MLP, my head wasn't exactly in the right place. I had a lot I was dealing with at the time. MLP helped me get out of this slump with its morals, which I actually needed and used. This is something that MLP hasn't really been able to do in a very long time. But Apple and Onion, a show not meant to teach morals, and this episode is the only one that has a moral from what I can tell, actually helped me with a problem that I still have. This episode is about anxiety, an issue that I have a strong case of and deal with near daily. You may or may not be able to hear it in my voice, but more than likely reading this script, I'm having anxiety right now. Anxiety is something that can keep you from shining or being even better at what you're already good at. Mine is showing my emotions, whereas Onion's here is showing his basketball skills. Onto the plot. The episode starts with a flashback when Onion was a child, which is a very good way to start an emotional episode. As you can see, he was and still is a very good basketball player. However, whenever it is game time is when Onion freezes.
I can get the ball in from anywhere on the court. Unless there's even more than just one single person that's not Apple watching.
And some of you may be thinking that this is a bit far-fetched, but no, it's actually an accurate display of anxiety. Surely the writer of this episode must have to deal with anxiety himself. Onion tries to get advice from Apple and Beef Jerky, but both of their plans fail. It takes Onion himself to take care of the nervousness. He goes to a peaceful place and remembers a time in which he had to deal with the anxiety. The flashback is completed, as well as now Onion knows what he must do. The advice for Onion is to just calm down, and this is actually a good lesson. Considering anxiety is something that increases your blood pressure, it is good to take a moment and focus on what you are doing.